Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Commander Brian Potter. I'm with the United States Coast Guard. I'm the operations officer at a helicopter base we have at it's called Air Station San Francisco, and it's based out of SFO Airport. So I am a helicopter pilot. I'm not anti-drone at all. The message today is really going to be the coexistence of manned and unmanned aircraft when we're dealing with some sort of search and rescue or some sort of response effort. That's going to be kind of the gist of the discussion today. Just making sure I cover everything here. Why don't you introduce yourself and then?
I'm Chief Warrant Officer Andy Cohen. I'm the Assistant Command Center Chief at Coast Guard Sector San Francisco. That's our main hub to dispatch for all the 11 Coast Guard missions we handle, pretty much ranging from roughly Humboldt all the way down to the Monterey-San Luis Obispo County line, throughout the San Francisco Bay to Sacramento, down to Stockton, and out 200 miles. So primary mission there where it comes into play is search and rescue planning and resource management of our assets to respond to any maritime distress.
So I'll start off with a story. Back in January, we, for the first time in my career and talking to other coasties, it was probably the first time we've seen something quite like this, but we had a search and rescue case in the South Bay area near the Dumbarton Bridge, which is local here in the San Fran area. And we had a search and rescue case where the Coast Guard was launched to look for a missing kayaker, potentially in the water. And we come to find out both Menlo Park Fire and Fremont Fire had drones also helping with the search. So it was the first time I had come across this, and talking to colleagues and other helicopter pilots, it was the first time many of us had heard of something like that. It was actually, it was definitely eye-opening. We had some good discussions that came out of it. The way it transpired is we were able to talk to our local Coast Guard dispatch office, which is Mr. Cohen's group, the command center. They were the first to tell us, hey, to expect that there'd be some unmanned aircraft, the quadcopters, doing some search and rescue in the area. So based on that, we were able to get up on a maritime band frequency, channel 21 or 22, something like that. We were able to start coordinating, and they were able to take certain areas, and once we got comms, we were able to deconflict. And in the end, it ended up enhancing operations. We've talked about coexisting, manned and unmanned aircraft, and this was a good example of it actually coming into play operationally. So that all went really well, and I guess what I want to, in this little short discussion here, is just really try to pass on to any operations, any first responders. I mean, what we saw was very specific to a search and rescue case in this area, but it's very generalizable to say that if you're starting up an unmanned program that you're expecting to use for any kind of first response, is to make sure you do a couple things. And one of those would be find out who the other operators of manned, especially government agencies, local agencies that might be using manned aircraft for things like search and rescue or response. Start networking and find out who they are. Let them know that you're about to start up a program, and have those points of contact. So if you're doing a search, in the Coast Guard's perspective, we do search and rescue over U.S. waterways, which could be bays and even rivers. Most of what we do is offshore, but definitely it's good that we get that interagency crosstalk going early, find out who those people are. So if there is a case that covers maybe land and water or back bay areas, sloughs, things like that, all the agencies involved are talking to each other. So identifying who the local operators are, what their capabilities are. Local agencies, aviation agencies, some fly day only, some fly day and night, some fly a little more all-weather. The Coast Guard prides itself on being an all-weather aviation service provider. So, finding out those kind of things is real important. And the other super important thing is communication. So, if you're dealing with manned aircraft, especially if you kind of take the I guess more typical fire PD model and the comms that you would use typically for those sorts of rescues and cases and searches, when you're talking about Coast Guard and aviation, Coast Guard uses, especially anything over waterways, we're going to be using the maritime band frequencies, and those are probably going to be the best to reach Coast Guard aviation or boat assets on scene. If you're dealing with aircraft, there's the VHF frequency bands that those aircraft will be on. So you might be on a case and where you have news helicopters, Coast Guard helicopters, and some local sheriff's department that all have helicopters in the area, and you have your drones. So that deconfliction, that comms plan is going to be super important to effective, well-integrated operations when it comes to searching. Anything else you want to add, Andy?
No, the big thing too is working. We want to work with the drones. They benefit. They help us. Just know our aircraft fly much lower a lot of times than your average aircraft you're used to seeing because they're looking for what we like to call that head floating in the water. It's a coconut. So they got to get down low. They're deploying their submarines right at a lower altitude. So they're flying a lot of times in that level where your drones are operating. They're flying in search patterns. So they're going, doing sharp turns, and they're trying to saturate an area. So just keep that in mind. Let us know if there's a drone in the area, because what they're doing is they don't want to be watching for that drone and that person in the water because they're doing everything visual. So Commander Potter can tell you more about that, but that's the biggest thing is just communicate. Let us know you're there, and we can, use separation to get the best search possible.
The other point I'll make is from a pilot perspective, I've definitely been on a lot of searches where there's other manned helicopters. Unmanned, like I said, this is like kind of a new frontier. So just keep in mind from a pilot's perspective, drones are a lot harder to see. So I don't know if all the COAs require it. I think just nighttime, like a strobe or some sort of lighting system on your drone is going to be required. I would encourage you from a pilot's perspective to always try to have some sort of lighting system that you keep on all the time. The anti-collision light is the most common, but I would just encourage always using that if you have that as part of your system. Yeah, even if I'm just encouraging you to go kind of above and beyond maybe what your COA explicitly states. Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll mention, if you're not familiar with it, there is a SAR addendum. There's some bigger agencies that look at search and rescue policy internationally and nationally. There's it's called a UAS, Unmanned Aerial System SAR addendum that you can Google and probably find online. That has really specific, some basic level guidance and also some planning guidance, job aids if you're starting up a program. That's something that we were able to look at and kind of get a little smarter on the UAS programs and how they'd be used for search and rescue. So that would be another great little thing to review before you start up a program. That's all I have on that.
That's it. Any questions?
Right on. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.